They called him the Ghost Rider, not because he chased spirits, but because he'd vanish into the Montana Badlands after dropping a fugitive at the marshal's feet, quoting old frontier sayings like gospel. Luke Harlan could recite the code of the West while landing a punch that'd knock a man cold from 20 paces. What the wanted posters never mentioned was that he was heading back to Willow Creek for the first time in 7 years, aiming to clear his name with the one woman who'd always seen the good in him, the woman now hitched to the town marshal. On Christmas Eve 1890, with snow blanketing the rugged plains like a forgotten promise, and the saloon lamps flickering against the chill, Luke Harlan slipped into that crowded town hall. His steel-gray eyes locked onto her in the front row, Sarah Whitaker, stunning as ever in her emerald green gown, her wedding band glinting like a shackle under the gaslights. She glanced up, spotted him, and in that instant, all the buried history surged back like a flash flood in the Rockies. What unfolds when old flames refuse to die out? That's a question that'd keep folks talking around the potbelly stoves for months. Everyone in Willow Creek swore Marshal Robert Whitaker and his wife, Sarah, had the ideal setup. You'd hear at the general store, the livery stable, even at the weekly barn dances. Robert Whitaker, pushing 50, with salt and pepper hair and a badge that commanded respect, tamed this booming mining town, bringing order where chaos once ruled. His wife, Sarah, 32, schooled out east, daughter of the late rancher Josiah Kane, who'd left more IOUs than cattle. Robert had settled those debts the day after their vows, no questions asked. Sarah ran the local schoolhouse, teaching kids their ABCs and arithmetic amid the scent of chalk and pine. She led the women's league, tended the ill, kept a spotless home with doilies on the tables and pies cooling on the sill. Her husband provided Hansamelia fine clapboard house on Front Street, mail-order dresses, even novels from Chicago. But if you paid attention, you'd catch how Sarah's laugh never lit her eyes, how she'd linger on the veranda at dusk, staring at the eastbound stagecoach fading into the horizon, how Robert would grip her arm firm, but polite when some cowboy chatted her up too long. A lady's place is by her hearth, not chasing whims, Robert would say, and Sarah would dip her head like the proper wife she'd trained herself to be. The trouble with gilded bars is the soul inside still yearns for open sky. Robert had good intentions. He'd buried his first wife to fever down in Kansas, helpless as she faded while he rode herd on outlaws. When he met Sarah Young, orphaned, scrambling to save her pa's legacy, saw a shot at safeguarding someone. He just never bothered asking if she craved that cage. For days before Christmas, Robert declared he'd head to Helena on state business ski talks with the governor's men. He'd return after the new year. "You'll manage fine," he told Sarah, pecking her cheek like a doting uncle. "Mrs. Ellis from across the way will look in." Sarah nodded, smiled, and waved as his wagon rattled off into the drifts. Little did she know, 800 miles south, the man she'd once pledged her heart to was pouring over a wire that'd upend it all. Little did she know Luke Harlan had unearthed proof of his innocence and was already barreling north. The Christmas Eve gathering was packed wall to wall, families squeezed into benches, kids squirming in starched collars, men doffing their Stetsons as Reverend Harlan Luke's pack lined the podium. Sarah sat front and center, her emerald gown feeling like a straitjacket, the room stifling. She waved her program like a fan, trying to heed the talk of forgiveness and fresh starts. That's when she saw Hima's silhouette by the coat hooks, tall and solid, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, but not enough to hide those piercing gray eyes that had starred in her dreams for 7 endless years. Her breath hitched, the program fluttered to the floor. Luke Harlan, alive, right here. He looked tougher, wirier, with creases fanning his eyes that time had etched. A jagged scar sliced from his temple to his chin, stark against his sun-beaten skin. But those eyes, those were unchanged. Memories crashed over her. Lazy summers by the creek at 17, his fingers in her curls at 19, the frantic night before he fled, backs against the corral fence, vowing eternity under the stars. "I'll return for you, Sarah," he'd murmured against her mouth. "As soon as I prove I'm clean." That was 7 years back, 7 years of silence, wondering if he'd met a bad end, learning to be Robert Whitaker's partner instead of Luke Harlan's sweetheart. Now he stood there, and Sarah's polished life cracked like thin ice. Their gazes met across the throng. He tipped his hat the slightest bit a nod, a query, a vow. Sarah's fingers pressed her throat, her ring a sudden weight. When she blinked, he was gone, melted into the night like a phantom, like a prairie mirage, like every joy she'd surrendered. But she knew, gut deep, Luke Harlan was back in Willow Creek. The old Harlan homestead hunkered empty on the town's outskirts, boards silvered by wind and woe. Sarah had no business going to Reno Call to hitch her buggy in the gray dawn, load it with goods for the needy on Christmas morn. But she did. He waited on the warped steps as if time had looped. 7 years dissolved like frost under the sun. "Hello, Sarah." His voice had gravel now, edges honed by hardship. It rippled through her, unrelated to the biting cold. "Luke." She climbed down, knees wobbly. "They said you were gone for good." "Folks say plenty." He rose, and she noted the changes taller somehow, broader in the shoulders, twin revolvers slung low, grips polished from use, tools of a manhunter. Most of it's hogwash. She ached to rush him, bury herself in his arms like the girl of old. Instead, she froze by her horse, recalling her vows, her husband's faith, the existence she'd forged from ruins. "Why now?" she breathed. Luke fished a packet from his duster, deliberate as a man who'd lived by outdrawing death. Found the real killer of Elias Grant. The name slammed her like a gale. Elias Grant, the storekeeper gunned down in his shop 7 years prior the slaying, was pinned on Luke, driving him into exile over a noose. Tracked him through 4 states. Luke went on, pieced together more than just a killing. He passed the papers. Their hands grazed and time folded. Bank ledgers, freight bills, sealed missives. Elias uncovered a graft scheme. Luke explained, stepping nearer, his scent of saddle leather and cordite wrapping her. Bigwigs in 5 counties dipping into funds, greasing palms. They silenced him. Sarah's fingers quivered as she scanned names she knew, sums that curdled her stomach. "So they framed you," she murmured. Luke's face hardened. Reckoned a preacher's kid gone rogue would distract the herd. She met his gaze, saw the toll of 7 years dodging shadows, morphing into something fiercer than her lost love. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have trusted you did." His palm cupped her face, tender as dawn. Only one who never wavered. "That's why I'm here." The air crackled, perilous. 7 years ache honed to this edge. "We can't," she said, even as she leaned in. "I know," but he held fast. 5 days on, Robert still in Helena. The front street house echoed like a mausoleum, hushed rooms, flickering shades, relentless thoughts. Sarah couldn't shake Luke's proof, those familiar names. That night, resolve hardened. Robert locked his files in his desk, drawer official matters, nothing for a wife. Tonight, it was her affair. The key hid behind a panel in his chamber. She'd found it ages ago, dusting, tucked the secret with her quiet defiances. The drawer yielded softly. Dispatches, reports, a fat dossier labeled Grant case closed. Her pulse thundered as she flipped it. Robert's jottings, testimonies, exhibits and clipped rearward, suspects he'd been commanded to ignore. Identical names from Luke's haul. Hunting something? Sarah whirled, heart in her throat. Luke loomed in the doorway, snow dusting his coat. How kitchen door unlatched. He entered, sealed them in. Risky, Sarah. Any varmint could stroll in. A faint grin ghosted his lips. "I'm no varmint." He advanced, and Sarah felt the isolation keenly, fireglow etching his rugged features, her dressing gown flimsy as gauze. "Unearthed anything?" He nodded at the desk. Robert probed but got shut down. She whispered, "He's clean." Relief washed Luke's face. Thank heavens. Couldn't stomach if you'd wet a snake. Sarah agreed silently. Robert had flaws, but crookedness wasn't one. Luke reached for the file, body brushing hers aroma of soap, hide, and frost dizzying. His arm pinned her lightly. Breath failed her. You ought to leave, she murmured. If Robert rides back, not tonight. Luke's spare hand wove into her loose tresses. Sarah. She pivoted, pressing flush to him, his heartbeat matching her frenzy. This is folly, she gasped. Maybe. His thumb mapped her cheek, jaw, and lips bow. But I've been loco without you. Time halted. 7 years pining distilled here Sarah wedged between Luke's solid frame and her spouse's desk, his touch igniting trails. Luke, she whispered, not a halt. His mouth hovered near when noise shattered the hush. Riders, several, thundering up Front Street. They sprang apart. Sarah clutched her neck. Through curtains, torch flares danced, figures shifting. Hide, she urged, but Luke drew his iron smooth as silk. Marshall's crew, he growled, peeking. Someone spotted me. Terror gripped Sarah. The basement truth cellar out back. They won't. Luke shook his no. If they dig and nab me, you're ruined. Won't drag you down. Hooves neared. Voices barked. Boots stomped the porch. Sarah Whitaker. Rough timbre. Strangers. Open up territorial warrant. Luke framed her face. Whatever they spin, you don't know me. Swear it. I can't swear. Won't let you suffer for my mess again. Knocks boomed. The door threatened to splinter. I swear, she breathed. Luke kissed her brow swift, soft. Farewell. Then he vanished rearward into the gale. Mrs. Whitaker, apologies for the hour. Deputy Marshal Victor Kane stood hat in hand, eyes flinty. Behind, 8 gunmen loitered in flurries. Hunting a wanted man, Luke Harlan. Recall him from before your nuptials. Sarah cinched her robe, voice steadying. Luke Harlan? Thought he was dead. Alive and lethal, ma'am. Kane scanned inside. Mind a search? Tibbs placed a matching felon nearby. No refusing, though she grasped Whitetown gossip of her and Luke's old spark had lingered post-wedding. Men fanned out like predators, appending chairs, probing nooks. Sarah trailed, pulse roaring, bracing for a yell of triumph. None came. Fresh brew, a deputy noted, hefting the coffee pot. Sleepless, Sarah lied. Brewed to calm jitters. Kane eyed her in lamplight. Seems rattled for an innocent. 8 armed intruders at midnight do that. Kane smiled, chilled. Luke Harlan sought for murder. Mrs. Whitaker murder and plotting. Aiding him means the gallows. Threat plain. Sarah squared up, drawing on poise from her Eastern tutors. Lucky I ain't seen him then. They cleared out half an hour later, but Kane stationed 2 watchers for safety. Sarah held till their lights faded, then slumped, quaking. Luke roamed the frozen dark, prey to beasts for truths endangering the mighty. Unless she acted. The notion scared her spitless, but in her pristine parlor, donned in the flawless life Robert had purchased, Sarah awoke. Perfection exhausted her. Dawn broke icy and brilliant. Sarah garbed meticulously her finest sapphire frock, accenting her hazel eyes. If torching her standing, best do it stylishly. The derelict Harlan spread lay beyond town, veiled by aspens and yesteryears. Her shadows tailed discreetly. Let them witness charity rounds, no crime and holiday goodwill. Luke sheltered in the barn, currying a midnight Mustang as mean as its master. He turned, fatigue carved his face from another vigil. Shouldn't be here, he said low. Neither should you. She unpacked her hamper, revealing beneath victuals, garb, bandages, and crucially, Robert's file copies, scribbled pre-raid. Luke eyed the sheaf, awe dawning. Sarah, this topples half the state brass. If they learn you hold it, they'd string me up, she stated flat. Aware. He strode over, seized her hands. Why chance all? Sarah beheld this shaper of her youth, blending the lad she'd adored and the outlaw he'd forged same soul. 7 years back, I was 25, terrified. Let them hound you off without a fight for us. Voice firmed. Won't repeat. Fire kindled in Luke's eyes, hope, or wilder. Grip tightened. Sarah. She hushed him. More. Wired Helena Mornin to the honest governor's aid, not Kane's cronies. They'll arrive by New Year's. Luke paled. You don't get a thief snake strike anyone threatening. Then ensure they fail. Sarah paced, Whitwaring household savvy repurposed. Town hall tomorrow, eve New Year's bash. Whole creek there. Sarah, what? She faced him, steel-heed mist gleaming. The rancher's girl had grit beyond deaths. Tom Willow hears facts all. She neared, noting his throat's bob. Need your aid, Luke. This round, no flight. The Willow Creek Town Hall brimmed on New Year's Eve 1890, lanterns aglow over finery-clad kin. Sarah perched up front, hands clasped, demure as ever but ticker racing. She eyed the side entrance Luke's ingress. If he braved this madness, if he banked on her enough for all in. Reverend Harlan ascended, Luke's kin unaware of the prodigal. Folks, we assembled to bid adieu to 1 year, hail another. But oft progress demands reckoning past wrongs. Sarah's signal. She rose, silk whispering in hush. Reverend spot on, she projected. Wrongs beg righting, fibs correcting. Murmurs swelled. Mrs. Ellis gawked. Deputy Kane, rearward tensed. Sarah, the Reverend began, but she advanced. 7 years ago, this burg swallowed a whopper. Luke Harlan slew Elias Grantcold. Swallowed cause easy over tough queries, safe over bucking big shots. Side door creaked. Luke entered. Gasps rippled from 400 souls. He cut a figure towering, shadowed, lethal, irons low, gray eyes raking for peril. But Luke Harlan killed no one, Sarah pressed, voice swelling. Elias died for exposing state graft died 'cause he'd out thieves fleecing us. Kane surged up, hand on holster. Mrs. Whitaker, you're unhinged. Sit. Decline. Luke's tone sliced keenly. He stepped lightly, town beholding his evolution. Lady speaking. Listen. Kane's men shifted, fingers itching, but Luke's draw flashed twin barrels on the crooked deputy. Steady gents, he drawled. Hall's sacred mind manners. Sarah brandished copies aloft. These prove it. Ledgers, bills, wires twixt officials and tycoons in 5 counties. Elias unearthed, they plugged him. Enough. Kane roared, yanking iron. Bedlam erupted shrieks, hollers, wails. But Sarah caught Luke's Colt's bark. Kane whirled, gun unfired, shoulder hit. He'll survive for trial, Luke yelled calmly. Kane's crew hand skyward, no stomach facing their quarry. Now, Luke proceeded, steady. Who's keen on how you've been skinned 7 years running? 2 hours unpacked proof. Dates, names, Hall's gasping, the crowd taxes siphoned. Mine stakes skimmed, school funds pinched. Outrage boiled. Last sheet down, Reverend rose. Appears my boys cleared, and this town owes deep. Luke sheathed, surveyed condemners of yore. No sorries needed, he said plainly. Just justice. The whistle pierced the Montana flats as Emily Harlan Sarah no more waited on the Northern Pacific platform. Valise in tow, heart buoyant. Graft hearings spanned 4 months. 15 indicted, 10 jailed, fortunes restored to the bilked. Kane rotted a dozen years in the state pen, mulling his plays. Robert took truths roughly, but unexpectedly. Night he rolled into chaos. He listened parlor-bound, silent. I shorted you, he admitted. Tried safety by shrinking you. That ain't love, Sarah fear. Divorce was discreet, amicable. Robert held house and badge. The town required his decency, misguided but true. Sarah claimed her dowry. Pa's locket, Ma's gown, liberty to chart her course. Luke, exonerated, took a federal deputy jig in terms. His picks for posts, turf, life. They headed Oregon-bound, where timber boomed, schools sought learned ladies, law craved straight shooters. The Pacific was vast, and azure toward boundless tomorrows. Set, Luke asked, clasping her hand as the boarding rang. Sarah glanced back at Willowshed's skin, then at her scarred yet unbroken man, toughened but tender, still spouting frontier wisdom with heart. Been set for 7 years. They climbed aboard westbound, Emily and Luke Harlan, ditching Ghost for potential. The frontier thrived on do-overs. Some just claimed M. Tardy. What do you think about this tale of love, betrayal, and justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Sarah make the right call, leaving her stable life for the unknown? Share your stance on whether old flames should ever be rekindled or if duty trumps the heart. I'd love to hear your perspectives.